Kade Vance slammed the door of his black Maserati shut, the sharp click echoing through the near-empty street as midnight crept closer. He hadn't planned on working this late, not again, but the board meeting ran long, and now his stomach was growling and his brain begged for caffeine. His usual 24-hour cafe downtown had closed for renovations, and instead of heading home to his penthouse suite, he searched for anything open. That's how he ended up in front of a small, dimly lit coffee shop tucked between a laundromat and a tattoo parlor. The sign above the door blinked weakly. Brew and Bloom. He almost turned back. But something tugged at him, maybe the quiet hum of jazz music leaking through the windows, or the soft glow of light inside. He pushed open the door. The bell chimed above him. Behind the counter, a woman looked up from her sketch pad. She wore a black apron with a coffee-stained towel tucked into the waistband, a messy ponytail falling over one shoulder. Her eyes locked on his immediately bright, amber, and alert despite the late hour. "Sorry," she said, standing quickly and closing her sketchbook. "Didn't think anyone else was coming in tonight, but I'm still open." Kate stepped closer, eyeing the menu written in messy chalk. "You got anything that'll keep a CEO from passing out at his desk?" She blinked, then grinned. "Double-shot espresso with a splash of dark roast. I call it the death sentence." He let out a short laugh. "Perfect." As she moved behind the machine, he leaned on the counter and watched her work with practiced ease. She didn't glance back at him, but he couldn't stop looking. Maybe it was the way she moved, confident and unhurried, or maybe it was the quiet calm she carried, like she didn't care who he was. He was used to people caring. "You're not from around here," she said without turning. "What gave me away?" he asked, amused. She slid the steaming cup across the counter. "The suit. That watch. The way you walked in like you owned the block." He looked down at his navy Tom Ford suit, then at the platinum watch on his wrist. "Fair enough. I'm Cleo," she said, wiping her hands on her towel. "And you?" "Kade." She tilted her head. "Kade is in." He raised one brow. "Just Kade." She laughed softly, then took a sip from her own mug. "All right, just Kade. Let me know how that death sentence hits you." He brought the cup to his lips and took a sip. It was strong, bold, with an edge of something sweet he couldn't place. "This is dangerous," he said. "You make all the drinks here?" She leaned on the counter across from him. "Every one. My shop, my rules." He stared at her. Really stared. There was something magnetic about her. Not just her looks, though. She was beautiful, with soft freckles across her cheeks and full lips that curled with mischief, but something else. She didn't flinch under his gaze. Didn't fawn. Didn't ask what company he ran or where he parked his car. She just looked at him like he was some guy who wandered in for coffee. And he liked that. "What were you drawing?" he asked. She hesitated, then slowly opened her sketchbook and turned it around. A rough charcoal illustration of peonies bloomed across the page, messy and beautiful. "Peonies?" he asked. "They were my mom's favorite," she said, her voice softening. "She used to plant them every spring. I guess I draw them when I'm thinking too much." He nodded, unsure why that hit harder than expected. "You always open this late?" he asked, glancing around. The place was cozy, brick walls, mismatched chairs, and soft yellow lights dangling from the ceiling. "Only Thursdays," she said. "I like the quiet. And the weirdos who come in." "Weirdos?" He raised an eyebrow. "You know. Like CEOs who look like they belong in a boardroom, but show up at midnight needing caffeine to survive." He laughed again, genuinely this time. "Touché." They kept talking. About nothing and everything. He told her about his long meeting, avoiding the name of his tech company. She told him about growing up in Portland, about saving for art school, about how she opened the cafe with her inheritance after her mom passed. When the clock hit 1, she finally said, "I should probably kick you out." He stood, reluctant. "Do you have a tip jar?" She rolled her eyes. "Just come back next Thursday." "That's payment enough." He reached inside his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek black card. She shook her head. "Don't do that. You don't even know what it is." She smiled. "Trust me. I don't need to." He paused, then tucked the card back inside. "All right, I'll come back next Thursday." And he did. Every Thursday without fail for 5 weeks. He showed up after midnight, sometimes in a suit, sometimes in jeans. And every time, she was there waiting with a cup of death sentence and a new drawing. They talked about music, books, the worst dates they'd ever been on. She teased him for not knowing how to cook. He teased her for owning 4 plants and naming them all after dead poets. And every time he left, he found himself thinking about her long after he should have been asleep. But on the 6th Thursday, everything changed. He walked into the cafe, but Cleo wasn't behind the counter. A man stood there instead, middle-aged, wiping down the espresso machine. "Where's Cleo?" Kade asked, his chest tightening. The man looked up. "She's out back." "You must be Kade." Kade blinked. "Yeah. She said if you came in, to tell you she'd be right back." But she wasn't. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Finally, the back door creaked open, and Cleo stepped out, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed. He stood quickly. "What happened?" "I wasn't sure you'd come tonight," she said softly. "Why wouldn't I?" She hesitated, then slowly walked toward him. "Because I found out who you are." He froze. She pulled out her phone and held it up. On the screen was a headline: "Kade Vance, CEO of Vance Innovations, named one of the most powerful men in tech." "I looked you up," she said. "I didn't want to, but I did. And now I don't know what any of this is." He stepped closer. "It's me. I didn't lie to you. You didn't tell me either. You didn't ask." She looked away, biting her lip. "Cleo," he said gently, "I came here every Thursday because I liked talking to you. Because I liked you. The real you. I didn't want this to be about who I am." She looked up at him, something unreadable in her eyes. I don't want to be some story you tell your rich friends. The barista you slummed it with for a while." His jaw clenched. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make me into that guy. I'm not." She stared at him, then slowly said, "Then prove it." He didn't hesitate. "I will." Kade didn't sleep that night. He paced the length of his penthouse, the city glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, his espresso untouched on the grand piano he never played. The article wasn't what bothered him, it was the look in Cleo's eyes. Not anger, not betrayal. Something closer to disbelief, like she'd been handed an elaborate illusion and told it had been real. He'd been real with her. That was the infuriating part. By morning, he'd reached a decision. He couldn't let her slip away because she misread his silence as deceit. At noon, he was outside Brew and Bloom again, this time in a white t-shirt and jeans. No driver, no watch. The sign still said open, but the lights were off. He knocked anyway. Nothing. He waited. 10 minutes. Then 20. A man walked by with a dog and gave him a curious look, but Kade didn't move. Eventually, the door opened a crack. Cleo stood behind it, her hair damp, a towel slung over her shoulder. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I didn't come for coffee." She stepped back but left the door ajar. He entered slowly, taking in the dim interior. Chairs were stacked. The espresso machine was quiet. A box of unopened beans sat on the counter. "You're closed." "For the day," she said. "Or maybe the week. I haven't decided." "You're not the type to hide." Her expression shifted. "I'm not hiding. I'm thinking." He folded his arms. "About what?" "About whether anything between us was real." He leaned on the counter but didn't touch her. "You think I planned this? That I walked in here hoping you'd fall for a version of me that didn't exist? You didn't exactly rush to correct me when I thought you were just some guy who needed caffeine. I didn't correct you because it was the first time in years someone didn't treat me like an ATM." Her jaw tightened. "You could have told me. I wanted to. But every time I thought about it, I pictured you looking at me differently. Like you are now." She turned away, gripping the edge of the sink. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers curled against the porcelain. "I Googled you again this morning," she said. "I found a photo of you at a gala last month. You were with a woman. Blonde. Model, I think. That was a sponsor event. She was assigned to work the press line with me. You looked close. Cameras lie. She met his gaze again. Do you? No, he said. Not to you. She studied him, something uncertain flickering in her expression. Then she looked away. I've had people walk into my life before, she said. They all left eventually. My father, my ex, even my best friend after Mom passed. I've gotten good at knowing when something's temporary. I'm not temporary. You live in a world I don't even understand. Then let me show you. She laughed, but it wasn't kind. I'm not a project. I know. I'm not a prize either. I never thought you were. He stepped closer, and this time she didn't move away. What do you want from me, Kade? I want you to see what I see, he said. That you're not someone I pass time with. You're the only part of my week that feels real. I don't care if you ever step into my world. I came here to be in yours. She swallowed, her hand resting lightly on the counter. You say all the right things. I mean them. The silence stretched between them until she finally said, I can't just forget that you kept something that big from me. But I believe you didn't mean to hurt me. He let out a breath. That's all I can ask. But if we do this, she said slowly, I need to know I won't wake up one day and find out I was just another Thursday night for you. You weren't, he said. You aren't. She didn't answer, but she didn't ask him to leave either. That night, she texted him an address. No explanation. He showed up at the location, a faded mural park on the east side of the city. She stood near the largest wall, holding 2 paintbrushes and a can of navy blue paint. You paint? He asked. Sometimes, she said, handing him one of the brushes. What are we painting? Don't know yet, she said. But if we're going to figure out how to trust each other, we might as well start by making something messy together. He dipped the brush into the paint and dragged it across the wall. She joined him, their strokes uneven, chaotic, but full of intent. When moonlight touched the top of the mural, their hands were stained and their arms ached, but neither of them stopped. You're terrible at this, she said, glancing at his section. He squinted at it. That's a very abstract bird. That's a cloud. He laughed, and this time she did too. It wasn't forced. It wasn't guarded. They sat on the curb afterward, sharing a bottle of fizzy apple soda from the corner store, watching their unfinished painting dry. You didn't ask what the peonies meant, she said suddenly. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. They were the last thing I planted with her. Before the chemo started. She said they were stubborn flowers. That they bloomed when no one expected them to. He didn't speak, just listened. I think that's why I draw them, she said. To remind myself that beauty can still grow out of hard things. He reached over and laced his fingers through hers. Then let's plant something stubborn. She didn't let go. In the weeks that followed, they didn't talk about money or titles or the company he ran. They painted more murals. They drove to antique markets. They ate greasy fish tacos on the hood of his car and argued over music. When a storm hit, they danced barefoot in the rain, soaked and breathless with nothing to prove. But the world didn't stay quiet forever. One Thursday night, just before closing, a man in a polished suit stepped into Brew and Bloom. He looked around with mild confusion before settling on Kade at the corner table. You've missed 3 investor calls, the man said. And the board is asking questions. Cleo appeared from the back, wiping her hands on a cloth, freezing when she saw them. Kade stood slowly. I'll handle it. The man's gaze flicked to Cleo, then back to Kade. You're throwing your career away for a coffee shop girl? Kade's voice was ice. She has a name. You've built an empire. Don't burn it down over a distraction. Cleo's eyes didn't leave Kade's. He turned to her. Wait for me. She didn't hesitate. Go do what you have to do. He walked out with the man, but before the door closed behind him, he looked back once and saw her watching. Not with fear. With faith. The boardroom was suffocating. Kade sat at the head of the obsidian glass table, his shoulders squared, his expression unreadable. Around him, 12 directors murmured among themselves, their tailored suits rustling with judgment. The gentle hum of the ceiling fan was the only sound that didn't carry weight. Vance, barked Gerald Connors, the oldest board member, his voice sharp enough to cut granite. You've been absent from 3 consecutive strategy sessions. You missed the sole acquisition call. That's not the behavior of a man leading a billion-dollar company. Kade didn't flinch. I've handled every major deliverable. Revenue projections are ahead of forecast. and the Soul deal is already in legal review. If you're concerned about appearances, I suggest you reevaluate what leadership actually means. Gerald's jaw twitched. We're concerned about your distraction. Distraction? Kade leaned forward, voice cool. You mean the fact that I've spent less time pandering to hedge fund leeches and more time actually understanding the people our technology affects? Murmurs rippled down the table. A few board members exchanged glances. Some intrigued, others cautious. You're playing with fire, Kade, Gerald warned. Investors don't like uncertainty. Kade stood, buttoning his dark blazer. Tell them the CEO is focused, the company is stable, and the next quarter will blow projections out of the water. If they want a puppet, they can look elsewhere. He left the room before they could reply. Outside, his assistant Olivia fell in step beside him, tablet in hand. You've got a meeting with the Tokyo partners at 3. Move it. To when? I don't care. Push it. Cancel it. Just clear my day. Olivia hesitated. She's the reason, isn't she? He didn't answer, but he didn't have to. That night, he drove without directions. His hand gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The city blurred past the windshield. He wasn't sure what he'd say when he saw her again, only that he needed to. He found her beneath a string of lights outside a ceramic studio, her apron speckled with glaze, her hands coated in dried clay. She was helping a younger girl box up supplies, her laughter soft and unguarded. It struck him like a punch how easy she looked away from him, like she'd built a life that didn't need his shadow. When she noticed him, her smile faltered, but she didn't look away. I thought you'd still be in a suit, she said as he approached. I thought I'd still be in that boardroom. The younger girl grinned and walked past them with a box, giving Cleo a quick wave. Once they were alone, she crossed her arms. Long day. Long enough to know I'm done letting other people define what matters. She arched a brow. And what does matter according to you? You, he said simply. And not in a metaphorical, you represent something bigger kind of way. Just you. The person who doesn't care about headlines or quarterly earnings. The person who paints clouds and names plants after dead poets. Cleo blinked slowly. You stormed out of a board meeting to tell me that? Technically I walked, but yes. She glanced down, brushing her hands off on her apron. You're not the only one who's been thinking. He waited. I applied to a residency program in the Catskills, she said. 3 months. Fully funded. I'd have my own studio. They offered it to me yesterday. Kade's mouth parted slightly. That's incredible. I haven't accepted yet. Why not? Because I wasn't sure if I was running from something or toward it. He stepped closer. And I still don't know. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, rectangular box. Then maybe this will help. She eyed it warily. Kade, it's not what you think, he said, placing it in her hand. Inside was a hand-carved wooden fountain pen, its cap engraved with tiny peonies. Her breath caught. I had it made last week, he said. Before the board blew up, before I knew about the residency. I saw it and thought she'll probably write something brilliant with this. She closed the box gently. It's beautiful. It's not an answer, he said. You don't owe me one. But I want you to go if it's what you want. You shouldn't stay behind for me. She looked up, her gaze piercing. And if I leave, I'll support you. From here. Or there. Or wherever you are. She shook her head. You don't do long distance. I didn't do Thursday night coffee either. Until you. They stood in silence, the night thick with questions neither of them dared voice. Then Cleo spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. When I saw that article with your name, I thought, he's unreachable, untouchable. You were this force I couldn't fit into my world. Kade's throat tightened. I never wanted to be unreachable. You weren't. Not really. She glanced down at the pen box again. You just made me afraid of how much I could want someone like you. He reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. I've never wanted anything the way I want you. She held his gaze, her voice steady. Then don't just say it. Show me. He did. Over the next 5 days, he cleared his schedule completely. No meetings. No travel. No press. He showed up at her cafe at dawn to help her repaint the chipped front door. He sat through a beginner's pottery class and destroyed 3 mugs before creating something vaguely cup-shaped. He watched her teach local kids how to sketch on sidewalks and helped her carry supplies from her tiny storage closet to a community art event. He didn't bring bodyguards. He didn't wear a watch. When the residency called to ask for her final decision, she asked for 1 more day. That night, he took her to the rooftop of an old library downtown. She'd once mentioned it had the best view in the city, and he'd rented it for the evening without telling her. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Candles lined the stone ledge. A table for 2 sat beneath a canopy of fairy lights. Cleo stared at it all, stunned. You did this. I owed you a real date. She turned to face him. You don't owe me anything. I want to, he said. I want to show up. For everything. They ate beneath the stars, the city stretching out around them. He poured her wine, she stole bites from his plate. They didn't talk about the future. They didn't need to. At the end of the night, as the final notes of the cello faded, she leaned into him. I called the residency back, she said. He kept his eyes on hers. And? I told them I'd accept, she said. But only under one condition. His brow lifted. Which is? That they give me a +1. He exhaled, laughter catching in his throat. You want me to come? I want us to go, she said. Together. Kade kissed her slow, certain, and completely without hesitation. The air in the Catskills was sharper than Cleo expected. Crisp, clean, and threaded with the scent of pine. She stood barefoot outside the art studio cabin, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug as early morning fog curled around the hills like silk. Inside, Kade was still asleep, one arm flung across the pillow, his hair tousled by the breeze slipping through the open window. She couldn't stop smiling, not the kind that announced itself, but the quiet kind that lived in her chest now. 3 weeks into the residency, and it already felt like a different lifetime. Not because the world had changed, but because she had. Her days were no longer measured in espresso shots and chalkboard menus. Now, they were sunrises, unfinished canvases, and the kind of silence that made you want to create something just to fill it. Behind her, the door creaked open slowly. You're up early, Kade said, voice rough with sleep. I'm working on a piece, she said without looking back. He padded out barefoot, wrapping his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Does it involve that blank canvas you've been ignoring for 4 days? I'm letting it marinate, she said. He kissed her neck, soft and unhurried. That's what you said about the lemon cake batter you forgot to put in the oven. That was a creative choice. He laughed, low and warm. You're impossible. She leaned into him. You love it. I do. They stood like that for a while, no need to rush. No sounds but birdsong and the occasional rustle of wind through trees. When she finally turned in his arms, her fingers brushed the edge of his jaw. You know, she said, I didn't think you'd actually come with me. I didn't either, he admitted, until I realized I was already halfway gone if I let you leave without me. She rested her forehead against his. You ever think about what happens after this? I think about it every morning. And? I don't want to go back to how things were, he said. I thought I needed the city, the company, the routine, but none of it felt like mine until you were in it. I'm not a constant, she said. I change my mind about everything, what I want, where I want to be. Then I'll change with you, he said. Or I'll stay still while you move. Just don't ask me to disappear. You're not capable of disappearing, she said, smiling. You're the loudest man in any room, even when you're silent. Later that day, Cleo stood in the gallery space provided by the residency, staring at the canvas that had haunted her since they arrived. It was still blank, the thick linen surface stretched tight, daring her to make the first mark. Kade had gone into town to pick up groceries after insisting he could handle it without buying 4 different brands of the same pasta. She dipped her brush into the deep burgundy she'd mixed hours earlier and pressed it to the canvas. The first line was uneven, the second more confident. By the time Kade returned, arms full of bags, the canvas was awash with layered strokes and blooming shapes that pulsed with emotion she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. He stood in the doorway watching her, holding a carton of eggs and a bag of fresh herbs. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked. She turned. "Peonies. Stubborn ones." He smiled, but not the kind reserved for charm or strategy. It was quiet and reverent, like he knew exactly what it meant that she'd painted them now, here with him watching. That night, a surprise storm rolled in. The wind knocked over patio chairs and thunder cracked across the sky like it was trying to split the mountains in two. Cleo stood at the edge of the porch, arms crossed, watching the rain drench everything in sight. Kade came up behind her with 2 mugs of tea. "You're thinking again." "I'm always thinking." "You know what I realized today?" he said. She glanced at him. "There's not a single part of my life I want back without you in it. Not the skyline, not the office, not even the penthouse." She took a sip of the tea. "What would you do instead?" "I've been sketching out something," he said. "A grant. For young artists. Kind of like this place, but mobile. Workshops in cities that don't have access to this kind of space. You'd run the creative side. I'd fund it." She blinked. "You're serious. Dead serious. You'd give up a billion-dollar company to chase murals with me?" "I'd hand it to someone else to manage. I don't need to be the face of it anymore. Not if I can build something that actually moves people." She stared at him, heart thudding. "You really are insane. Only about you." They kissed under the porch light, the rain crashing around them like applause. 2 months later, the launch of the Bloom Initiative made headlines not for its size, but for the fact that Kade Vance, tech mogul, had quietly stepped back from daily operations to focus on creative outreach and social equity through the arts. Cleo didn't do interviews. She let her work speak for itself. But when a reporter caught her outside the first Bloom pop-up in a converted train station in Detroit, she said only one thing. "I didn't steal his heart," she said. "He gave it to me and told me to do something beautiful with it." That fall, they returned to the city together, not to resume what they'd left behind, but to start something entirely new. They moved into a loft above a crumbling bookstore, adopted a cat neither of them had planned for, and hung the peony painting in the front hallway where it caught the morning light. Kade still wore suits sometimes. But he also wore paint-splattered hoodies and carried a sketchbook, pretending he could match her talent. He couldn't, but she never said so. And every Thursday night, without fail, they made coffee together. Not because they had to, because it had always been theirs. The gallery in Berlin was nothing like Cleo had imagined, sleek, minimalist, almost too clean. Her hands were still faintly stained with ochre from painting that morning, and she resisted the urge to tuck them behind her back like she didn't belong here. But when the curator led her into the main hall and she saw her work hanging in the center, framed in soft spotlight, she forgot to breathe. Kade stood beside her, his blazer unbuttoned and collar open, hands in his pockets. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at the piece, the one she'd finished in the Catskills and never planned to show. The peonies were bolder now, more defined, but still reaching toward something unseen, something wild and just out of frame. "They hung it exactly the way you asked," he said finally. "I didn't think they'd put it in the center," she murmured. "They didn't. I did." She frowned slightly. "Kade, I funded the exhibit. Quietly. No press. No speeches. I just wanted your work where it belonged." She turned toward him, her mouth parting. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want it to feel transactional," he added. "I wanted it to feel like support. Real support. The kind that doesn't need credit." Her chest tightened. "You shouldn't have to hide how much you help me." "I'm not hiding it. I just don't want the world to think your success is tied to my money. It isn't. It's your vision. Your voice." She touched his arm, her fingers curling lightly around his wrist. "I think I'm still getting used to someone standing behind me without trying to take the brush out of my hand." He smiled faintly. "I'll never touch your brush." The curator called her over, and Kade stepped back, letting her take the moment. She moved with quiet poise, answering questions in German she'd learned in short bursts over the past month. Her accent clipped but confident. He watched her like he always did, completely still, as if missing a second of her would be unforgivable. When the exhibit closed for the evening, they walked back to their flat just off Sprufer, their fingers brushing now and then, not quite holding hands, not needing to. The city was alive with soft music from riverside clubs and the hum of late-night cyclists. Inside, she kicked off her shoes and dropped onto the couch, folding her legs underneath her. Kade joined her, tugging her close until her head rested on his chest. "I got an offer today," she said, tracing the edge of his shirt collar. "For what?" "A teaching residency. In Kyoto. 6 weeks. He didn't flinch. "You want to go?" "I think I do." "Then we'll go." Her eyes lifted to his. "You'd come with me?" "I'm not interested in watching you from a distance," he said. "If your path winds through Japan, then so does mine." She studied him for a long moment. "Do you ever regret it? Stepping away from the company?" "Not once. Not even when your name dropped off the front page?" He shook his head. "I was on the front page for things that didn't matter. Now I'm in the background of the only story I care about." She leaned up and kissed him, slow and sure. The kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything, just gave. "I used to think I'd have to choose," she whispered, brushing her nose against his, "between love and freedom. But with you I don't feel caged. Because I never wanted to be the net," he said. "Just the wind at your back." They left for Kyoto 2 weeks later. The apartment they rented was small and sunlit, with rice paper doors and a balcony that overlooked a quiet canal. Cleo taught a class of university students who adored her. Kade spent his days drafting the expansion of the Bloom Initiative into Asia, visiting local studios and partnering with nonprofits to bring art programs into schools that had lost funding. Their evenings were filled with street food, temple visits, and long walks under cherry blossoms that painted the sky in shades of blush and snow. They got lost more than once, but Cleo always said the best art came from wandering. One morning, she found a small envelope on her easel. Inside was a single sheet of handmade paper, folded precisely. She opened it and found 3 lines, handwritten in Kade's clean script. "I've seen the world in grayscale, then you arrived, and nothing's been black and white since." She read it twice, then stepped quietly into the kitchen, where he stood pouring tea. "You wrote this?" He nodded. She touched his chest, over his heart. "You still carry your silence like armor." He looked down at her. "You still see through it like glass." She pressed her lips to his. "I love you." He didn't answer with words. He just pulled her close, held her like he'd been waiting to exhale. That spring, they returned to the States briefly for the opening of the New York satellite campus of the Bloom Initiative. Cleo unveiled a mural that wrapped around the entire building, a riot of color and movement, with peonies at the center, blooming defiantly in a sea of shifting shapes. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and photographers snapped pictures of the art, Kade pulled her aside, his hand warm on the small of her back. "There's something I've been meaning to ask," he said. She tipped her head. "Is this about the mural?" "No," he said. "It's about forever." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a ring, not flashy, not loud. A delicate gold band with a single opal, iridescent and shifting with light. She stared at it, then back at him. "I want to marry you," he said, voice steady. "Not because we need to. Not because it changes anything. But because I want to wake up every morning knowing we chose each other. Again and again." She didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She just smiled, bright and sure. "Then yes," she said. "Let's choose each other." Every day. They married on a hillside in the Catskills the following autumn, surrounded by wildflowers and friends they'd gathered from every corner of their journey. She wore a gown made of silk and stardust. He wore a suit with paint on the cuff from a mural they'd finished the week before. They didn't need vows. Their lives had already said everything. And when the sun dipped behind the trees, casting gold across the valley, they danced barefoot beneath strings of lights, laughter echoing like music from a world they built together, one stubborn bloom at a time. Their love didn't settle. It expanded. It challenged. It roared. And it never asked them to choose between freedom and forever. It gave them both.